Heading up the news this morning, rock and roll singer Rick Nelson was killed last night in a private plane crash in Texas.
Before he died, Ricky Nelson tried to tell the world exactly what was destroying him, but almost nobody listened.
The first record, when that sold 1 million records, I could not believe it. I couldn't believe that it would actually come over a car radio and I'd be driving down and hear it on the radio. I mean, that was the greatest thrill, and it still is.
On TV, he was America's first teen idol, the clean-cut son from Ozzie and Harriet. In private, he was trapped by that image, bleeding money, clinging to fame, and writing songs as warnings about what it was doing to him.
The plane first severed these power lines, then hit 2 utility poles before bouncing into the pasture just on the other side of the road, barely missing 3 houses.
Years later, after the plane crash, lawsuits, and family revelations, we can finally see what Ricky was really trying to warn us about. The parental blueprint. When Ricky released The Garden Party in the early 1970s, fans were instantly drawn to the intensity of the lyrics, but none of them understood the warning behind each word until now. Fans are beginning to connect the dots and have traced it back to his early years, uncovering all the subtle hints that had been misunderstood for years. Ricky's troubles began the moment his parents forced him into the spotlight. As a kid, he was often sick due to severe asthma, which kept him thin and weak. People who knew him back then remembered him as being painfully shy and withdrawn, definitely not spotlight material. Still, Ricky did not get the chance to make his own decisions, and his parents never cared enough to consider his discomfort. However, as soon as he appeared on screens, he went from a private child to a public figure almost instantly. The show expanded quickly, leading to a film in which Ricky acted alongside major stars like Rock Hudson, and then to a television series. Audiences responded strongly to Ricky's gentle personality. They loved him, and this made his rise to fame faster than usual, and he soon became a household name. On set, Ricky showed good instincts for comedy and a natural playfulness, which was compared to a young Jerry Lewis. But his father, Ozzie, disapproved. He preferred control and structure, and he expected Ricky to follow his direction exactly. Behind the scenes, Ozzie controlled most aspects of his sons' lives, especially their finances. Ricky and his older brother David earned over $500 a week, which was more than many working professionals at the time, but the boys never saw any of it. Ozzie placed their earnings in savings accounts and gave them small allowances regardless of their personal needs. He believed he was protecting them, but the lack of access to their own money caused frustration and confusion. Ricky was respected and wealthy in the public eye, yet he had no financial independence or freedom. At school, Ricky felt the divide between his public fame and private limitations. Classmates didn't know how to relate to someone who appeared on television every week, so Ricky began distancing himself from others and struggled academically. He skipped school often, failed classes, and developed a reputation for misbehavior. This was the first warning sign that was misunderstood as youthful rebellion, and it was all because he felt stuck between being treated like a star in public and being restricted at home. However, he didn't dwell on the feelings for too long because he found a new hobby, one that wasn't under the control of his parents and would possibly give him the key to earning his own freedom. He had discovered music, constantly practicing the guitar and drums and developing real skill at the age of 15. By the middle of the 5th season of Ozzie and Harriet, just before Ricky turned 17, rock and roll was taking over the country, and he was utterly obsessed with it. He spent most of his allowance buying the latest records, and Carl Perkins inspired him the most. He was finally investing in something he loved. That musical escape soon found a purpose when he met his first girlfriend, Marianne Gaba, the lady who played his girlfriend on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. Unfortunately for the young lovers, Ricky's parents disapproved of their relationship because they believed it would damage the clean-cut image they had built for him. However, that wasn't their only reason. They also thought Marianne wasn't good enough for their carefully managed son. What they didn't expect was that Marianne would influence Ricky in a way they hadn't imagined. She was the catalyst that encouraged Ricky to be his own person, and his parents' efforts to restrict him only made him more determined to move beyond their control. Unfortunately, their romantic relationship was cut short, but Ricky soon bounced back into the dating pool. Then came his second girlfriend, Diana Osborne, who indirectly launched his musical career. At 16, Ricky wanted to impress Diana, who was a huge Elvis Presley fan. When he told her his plans to make a record, and she laughed, he took it as a challenge. With his father's help, he secured a one-record contract with Verve Records, a jazz label seeking a young performer. By March 1957, his first professional recordings were finished, including I'm Walkin'. Instead of releasing the song through the usual music channels, his father, Ozzie Nelson, devised a strategy that became one of the most effective promotional moves of the 1950s. Ricky would debut the song on their family TV show. The strategy was, however, beyond promotional. It was also a means of keeping his son under his control. No one, not even Ricky himself, suspected a thing, and there were a lot of things he was ignorant of. The young singer also didn't know how to lip-sync at the time. Painfully shy and awkward, he had to act like he was performing the song live on an episode of Ozzie and Harriet. Even his older brother revealed how uncomfortable it was to watch. But Ricky, stiff and nervous, pushed through. After the episode aired, Ricky continued learning by accepting minor, unpaid appearances. One of these was a routine high school assembly where he performed Blue Moon of Kentucky. Nothing about the event suggested anything unusual, but when he arrived at school the next day, Ricky found himself surrounded by excited teenage girls. The reaction shocked him. His brief TV appearance, despite the nerves and stiff delivery, had created an immediate fan base. That single episode had been enough to turn him into a teen idol overnight. But that was only the beginning of his complicated story. The teen idol. Being the first teen idol wasn't really what Ricky envisioned for himself. He was just a young boy with a passion for singing. But when fame came calling, he decided to bask in its full glory. His weekly TV appearances drew in younger viewers and inspired many teenagers to start playing music. As Ricky's fame grew, his father succeeded in getting him out of his Verve contract by arguing he was underage when he signed it. Soon after, Ricky joined Imperial Records, the same label as his idol Fats Domino. His success also opened doors to acting, landing him roles in films such as Rio Bravo and The Wackiest Ship in the Army. During his time at Imperial, Ricky built a strong creative team of songwriters, musicians, and arrangers who helped him develop his unique sound, which his fans grew to love. As a young star on his parents' show, he became one of America's favorite teen idols in the late 1950s and early 1960s, with more than 9,000 fan clubs and had sold over 35 million records. His influence on early rock and roll was far bigger than his clean-cut image suggested. Every week on TV, viewers saw Ricky mime his latest songs like Bebop Baby and Hello Mary Lou. His rockabilly style was neat and polite, matching the show's wholesome look and his parents' image. At a time when Elvis Presley wasn't even shown on camera below the waist, Ricky was still bringing rock and roll directly into American homes. Musicians respected him, too. John Fogerty said Ricky's rockabilly records were as good as some of the best early rock music. Singer Marshall Crenshaw felt Ricky never got enough credit, even though Ricky's TV performances inspired many young musicians. Guitarist James Burton, who played for Ricky for nearly 9 years before joining Elvis's band, said even Elvis watched Ozzie and Harriet just to see Ricky perform. But that influence didn't last for long because he couldn't remain young forever. After his contract expired in 1962, he moved to Decca Records a year later and signed a 20-year contract, but the momentum began to slow. His early releases there didn't make much of an impact, and although he had one more major hit in 1964, the arrival of the Beatles changed everything. The musical style that once felt fresh now seemed dated, and his albums followed a predictable formula with safe arrangements and familiar photo covers. His clean-cut image didn't match the new era, but Decca still kept him under contract. By the mid-1960s, Ricky shifted his sound toward country music and became one of the early figures in country rock. He helped create what later became known as the California Sound, influencing artists like Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, and the Eagles. By 1967, the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet was gone, and the teen idol everyone once knew as Ricky was stuck. As a teenager, he had coasted on good looks and the comfort of a TV audience that adored him. But now, as an adult, that formula no longer works. Ricky was about to understand the price of being famous from such a young age. The needed reinvention and a public disapproval. Finally, out of his parents' protective clutches, Ricky was determined to prove that he didn't need their influence to survive as a singer in a competitive industry. He spent most of his adult life trying to escape the image he had as a teenager, even officially changing his recording name to Ricky Nelson the day he turned 21. However, viewers who watched him grow up never stopped calling him Ricky, and even in the 1980s, Carl Perkins referred to him as Ricky, and said they were the last of the rockabilly breed. Unfortunately, his early attempts to reinvent himself, first with country-leaning albums, then with more modern pop material, fell flat. Longtime fans didn't recognize the new direction, and the new audiences he hoped to impress weren't buying in either. Still, he continued to push forward. Producer John Boylan encouraged Rick to lean into the growing Los Angeles country rock scene, and Rick's 1967 album Another Side of Rick hinted at where he was headed. The soft, introspective tracks weren't hits, but they showed that the former teen idol was searching for something deeper and more honest. At the end of 1968, after a run of uninspiring club dates on the East Coast, Rick returned to Los Angeles, determined to change everything. He spent long days in Malibu writing, listening to Bob Dylan, and haunting the Troubadour, a hotspot for the new country rock sound. One night in 1969, a chance backstage conversation with Poco's roadie changed everything. Rick learned that Poco's bassist, Randy Meisner, was leaving the band. Meisner had a powerhouse voice and serious musical talent, precisely the kind of player Rick needed. Within days, Boylan contacted Meisner about forming a new band with Rick. Meisner said yes, and then they recruited guitarist Alan Kemp and drummer Pat Shanahan. The group rehearsed at Rick's house for weeks before Boylan booked them for a week at the Troubadour, now calling themselves the Stone Canyon Band. The shows were a shock. Rick wasn't the clean-cut kid from TV anymore. He was an adult fronting a serious country rock band, and they were good. Their new sound led to She Belongs to Me, a mellow Dylan cover released under Rick Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band. In the competitive climate of 1969, where Rick was still dismissed as a relic of the 50s, its success meant everything. It proved he wasn't stuck in the past. Rick and the Stone Canyon Band hit the road in a station wagon, playing small folk clubs around the country. Their shows mixed new material with fresh arrangements of his old hits, turning familiar songs like I'm Walkin' and Travelin' Man into something warmer and more mature. Crowds loved it. The band added steel guitarist Tom Brumley, fresh off years with Buck Owens, and the chemistry clicked instantly. By the time they returned to the Troubadour, they were selling out shows and winning over critics who had long written Rick off. Rick followed this momentum with Easy to Be Free, his most personal song yet. It didn't climb the charts, but it captured the new Rick. Thoughtful, grounded, and far from the tuxedo-wearing teenager performing on a sitcom stage. A live album from the Troubadour became his first charting LP in years, but life on the road took a toll. In 1970, after a bruising tour of military bases, Meisner quit, then returned, then quit again, this time for good. His final departure came after a chance gig backing Linda Ronstadt, where he connected with Glenn Frey and Don Henley. They soon formed the Eagles, bringing with them the exact country rock sensibilities they had developed with Rick. Even with the lineup shifts, Rick pushed ahead, recording Rudy V in 1971, and continuing to evolve into a songwriter rather than a former teen idol relying on past glory. The band played local venues and prepared for a fall tour, but before Rick could fully step into his new identity, he faced one last confrontation with the image he had spent years trying to escape. When Ricky Nelson stepped onto the Madison Square Garden stage on October 15, 1971, he had just one thing in mind: to warn of the imminent doom that would befall him if he failed to get rid of an image that was tightly attached to a dark period in his life. But the fans couldn't see past the rhythm. That was the day his fate was sealed. He had appeared on stage in a contemporary 1917 style: shoulder-length hair, bell-bottom jeans, a velvet shirt, and cowboy boots. A direct contrast to his clean-cut 1950s teen idol image. Having imagined the several ways his fans would react to the change, nothing prepared him for the instant disapproval he got that night. In all his years as a public figure, Ricky had never experienced the feeling of rejection, let alone talk of getting booed off stage. That experience shattered him, shredding the last bit of hope of survival that he had clung to. But instead of disappearing in humiliation, Ricky chose to respond the only honest way he knew how: through a song. Garden Party was a response that neatly laid out exactly what happened that night, and the lyrics were so intense that they immediately drew the world's attention, ranking number 6 on the US Billboard pop chart, making it Ricky's first hit after so many years. Unfortunately, Ricky didn't see this achievement as a win. Fans' reactions were divided. Some tried to explain that their reaction at Madison Square was directed at a police incident involving fans in the audience. In contrast, others focused on the song's lyrics, and their attempts to interpret it led to questions that plunged Ricky deeper into despair. In a 1974 interview with Zigzag, he finally addressed the endless speculations and explained that while the tune sounded simple at first, the lyrics revealed the real message. He wasn't longing for the 1950s like most fans had deduced. He was trying to escape them. He was simply done carrying an identity that didn't belong to him, one that his famous parents carefully crafted. Ricky knew how to escape his impending doom. The line in his song, "You see, you can't please everyone, so you've got to please yourself," was his solution. But living that truth proved far harder than writing it, and since the damage had already been done, he decided to stick with the version of himself that the world wanted to see, slowly chipping away at any form of hope until the very end. However, fans couldn't understand why Ricky was so desperate to break free from an identity that the world had resonated with for years. But that didn't hinder the song from going viral. In 1972, he reached the top 40 for the last time with Garden Party. The song reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart, eventually earning a gold certification. The follow-up single, Palace Guard, reached number 65. When MCA Records shut down the Decca label and moved Ricky to MCA, his comeback soon faded. His band broke up, and MCA wanted him to work with a producer on his next album. A new Stone Canyon band was formed, and Ricky continued touring. Thanks to Garden Party, he moved from small bars to better-paying venues, but his motivation to evolve was dead. By 1974, MCA had no idea how to market the former teen idol. His albums were ignored and the public had moved on. Ricky kept trying to score another hit, but songs such as Rock and Roll Lady failed to do so. With 7 years still left on his contract and no commercial improvement, MCA dropped him. What should have been a reinvention flopped, but that wasn't the only part of his life that was failing. The beginning of the end. When Ricky first met Chris Harmon, it seemed like a perfect match. Chris came from a well-known family. Her father was a famous football star, and her mother was an actress and model. Her background felt familiar to Ricky. For the first time, his parents fully approved of the girl he was dating, which was rare. However, the bond between Ricky and Chris grew quickly. Both were naturally quiet and understood each other effortlessly. By 1963, Chris became pregnant and everything sped up. Her conservative family insisted on marriage, leaving Ricky with little room to choose. They got married that same year in what Ricky later called a shotgun wedding. It wasn't the romantic dream he once imagined. Despite the challenges, life moved forward. Ricky and Chris eventually had 4 children, but even a growing family couldn't steady his career. Still, Ricky refused to give up, and he kept performing, writing, and searching for a moment that would restore his confidence, but nothing worked. By 1975, Ricky's marriage to Chris Harmon was in serious trouble. Their relationship became strained by money problems and emotional stress. Chris liked an expensive lifestyle and wanted Ricky to be home more, but she also expected him to earn enough money to support her spending. Ricky was stuck between constant touring and trying to keep his family stable. This only made their problems worse. Chris began drinking heavily, and the children were often left with the household staff. The marriage slowly collapsed. By 1977, divorce was unavoidable. Unfortunately, when the divorce was completed after 5 years, Ricky was nearly broke from legal costs and financial payments. The divorce took a heavy toll on Chris as well, who faced her own severe personal struggles in the following years. This event even hastened Ricky's downward spiral, leaving him feeling helpless. During this chaotic period, Ricky's love life also became messier. In 1980, he met Georgianne Crew during a tour. Their short relationship led to her being pregnant. But Ricky, still trying to figure out his failing life, definitely did not need another child in the picture. He ignored her attempts to contact him, leaving her to raise their son, Eric, alone at first. When Eric was 6 months old, Crew brought him to one of his concerts so he would see the child. She later took legal action, and blood tests proved that Ricky was the father. He was then ordered to provide financial support, even though his career was struggling. In the middle of all this, Ricky met Helen Blair, but it was already too late. The damage caused by his controlling parents, along with his inability to let go of his past image, all played a part in the choices that eventually led to the tragic end of his life. The flight to doom. Ricky clung to the successful, young, and vibrant image everyone wanted to see. But his reality didn't align with that image anymore. He wasn't as successful or wealthy as his younger self, and in an attempt to keep up appearances, he made a careless decision. In 1985, strapped for cash but desperate to maintain his star image, Ricky purchased a second-hand aircraft riddled with mechanical problems. He boarded that faulty private jet for a New Year's Eve show, a decision that would prove fatal. When offered safer, more affordable options like a tour bus, Ricky refused. He was trapped by the image of the wealthy star, unable to relinquish the luxuries of his past fame. Just a few hours to the new year, Ricky's jet had taken off from Guntersville, Alabama, en route to a New Year's party in Dallas. Still, on the way, the plane experienced a catastrophic mechanical failure and caught fire, leading to the death of every other person on board except the pilot. 5 years before his tragic death, Ricky met Helen Blair, a stunning model and an animal trainer from Las Vegas. During one of the most challenging periods in his life, he had just gone through a financially and emotionally draining divorce. Their spark was instant, and the relationship ignited so quickly that marriage plans were in order. But Ricky's parents disapproved. Nobody and nothing was ever good enough for their son. They pressured him into postponing the wedding, but he did not budge. Unfortunately, Ricky was on the jet with Helen when the tragedy occurred. After the bodies were recovered from the crash site, Helen's parents had requested that their daughter be buried next to Ricky. Still, being the controlling parents they were, they denied the request, dishonoring Ricky's relationship even in death. 700 fans and several celebrity mourners were in attendance at the funeral, but no one acknowledged Helen's death or even mentioned her name. Even in death, his parents never stopped controlling the narrative. After the tragic event, David, Rick's older brother, was there to pick up the pieces and take care of the sons he left behind, who were only 18. He also became the executor of the estate, but it was in terrible shape because of divorce issues, debt, and many complications. Sorting it all out took years, and it wasn't easy. It was discovered that Capitol Records had been underpaying Rick Nelson for years, holding between $100 and $250 million in unmatched income. Money Capital claimed it couldn't link to any artist, even though the estate believed Rick's share could easily be identified. Auditors were blocked from reviewing key documents, and income that should have been kept in separate accounts was moved into a general pool, making it harder to trace the money's origin. Capitol also failed to apply a 1992 royalty increase that doubled Rick's rate and raised his percentage on licensed uses of his music. The estate also discovered that digital royalties were being reduced by deductions meant for physical records, costs like breakage and distribution that do not apply to digital sales. Sadly, Rick Nelson never got the respect he earned, not while he was alive and not after he was gone. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.